Hello, everyone. We are back. This is Got Next with Meghan and Zora. I'm Zora. Meghan is still enjoying some time with her newborn son, but it is the perfect day to have Autumn Johnson back with us. Autumn, we said you were going to be back. I think the Monday after Selection Sunday is just the cherry on top. You are an analyst, you are a host, you're a reporter, but perhaps most relevant today is all your work with Bracketology. I have questions. I have opinions. A lot of people have predictions, but before we get into anything, you were in Indianapolis as all of this was coming together in terms of the women's NCAA March Madness bracket. Your overall thoughts on the finished product?
Yeah, we all had questions and I have all the answers for you. I was with the selection committee. Typically it's for 5 days leading up to it, but for this year I was only with them for 1 day. And it was very insightful just to hear the process of how they decided everything. The order of the one seeds was the hot topic in the room. And I don't think we've had this type of discussion in a minute before. And that just speaks to the parity of the game that we've seen. Everyone has beaten everyone. You could have reordered everything and it still would have been a phenomenal bracket. But I'm really excited to see how it shakes out. But to be there, to talk to the chair, to get all the answers, I'm really excited to dive into it with you.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to hear, because there's reasoning behind everything. And let's be clear, there is always going to be someone who's not happy with where they end up. Right. And we're talking humans here, and there's always a little opinion. I know the selection committee really tries hard to have criteria, but sometimes they're going to have to make, we're talking decisions that come down to like hairs, right? Because these teams were so close. It's good to know that it was a hot topic inside, the selection committee in the war room when it came to these number one overall seeds and their ranking, because that is the big topic 24 hours later on Monday morning as everything has unraveled. I had some family over as we were watching Selection Sunday, and I had everybody do a prediction of who they thought the top 4 seeds would be. And it was clear UCLA, USC is in South Carolina. Yep. And what was different is some people had Notre Dame, some people had Texas, some people had UConn, some people Southern Cal, which is very interesting. At the end of the day, the seeds are as follows: UCLA, number 1 overall seed. Then you have South Carolina, then you have Texas, and then you have Southern Cal, which was interesting out of this. And I can't remember maybe the last time coaches were so opinionated from the number 1 overall seeds on where they fell, right? Like the ranking of the number ones. It wasn't that they thought they should be number 1 and they were 2 or 3. No, the names on your screen are all number ones, but some of them weren't happy with where they fell. So we're going to start with the second number 1 overall seed in South Carolina. And Dawn Staley was pretty vocal. Let's take a listen to what she had to say, and then we'll debrief it all.
Going into this, what was your gut feeling where you'd end up versus how it played out?
My gut? My gut was the number 1 overall seed because we put the work in. That's what my gut gives me. Obviously it's disappointing. It really is. I'd like to get some feedback on how they came to that conclusion because we put together, we manufactured a schedule that, if done right, it should produce the overall number 1 seed. But I will say this: we're going to make adjustments to our schedule in the future if the standard is the standard. If that's the standard, then we can play any schedule and get a number 1 seed.
So just a brief synopsis there. Coach Staley saying, hey, we curated our schedule to put us in a position to be the number 1 overall seed, and that is not how it ended up. How do you receive Dawn's thoughts, Autumn?
Coaches are so vocal because it matters. It matters where you're placed because that determines your strength of your path to the Final Four and ultimately that championship stage. In South Carolina, they played 19 quad 1 games, 16-3 overall. They had 12 ranked wins. And what stood out to me is Dawn Staley saying like, hey, we schedule November and December for March and April. And if you pick our schedule and someone else's schedule and do the blind test, you would pick ours every single time. She said they might as well play an easy schedule if strength of schedule doesn't matter. And they had some hiccups, but when I was talking to the selection committee, the biggest hiccup for them was that UConn game falling by 29 points. And that ultimately did it when they looked at, as you mentioned, the hairs of how things went. That came down to no other one seed had that 29-point loss. Mm-hmm. Also, they look at head to head. There's overall body of work, yes, but there's other components that the selection committee look at. And head to head was another hot topic for the selection committee because you can't ignore the loss in November to UCLA. So overall, you could put anyone at that number 1 overall seed. I knew it would come down to UCLA or South Carolina, but that's how deep it is. But the beauty is like they're on opposite sides. We could see this in the championship for a rematch. And I think this is a different South Carolina team. I think this has motivated them. They're coming in with a chip on their shoulder, even though they said there's no chip, but that chip might turn into a ship. So we're gonna see.
Yeah, and not that the Gamecocks need any added motivation. I think they do it from within great themselves. Yeah, I was probably thinking that it's hard to put South Carolina as the number 1 overall seed when they did lose to UCLA, who they were kind of going back and forth with. I thought what you brought up, how you perform in losses is big, and you mentioned the double-digit loss to UConn, which was towards the end of the season. And yeah, and Dawn took a shot with her schedule. There is no denying how tough South Carolina's schedule is and how they did with it, right? They played not just UCLA and UConn, they played NC State, they played Duke, they played TCU. And then of course, we can't forget the gauntlet that is the SEC. Mm-hmm. To compete in that league each and every night is tough. But, I guess to me, I don't know how much, number 1 to me is number 1. And I get it, right? These are high standard, coaches that want to be the best. Mm-hmm. But the bracket's not bad for South Carolina.
It's not bad at all. I don't see a problem in their way at all. I think they're going to get to the championship stage. Honestly, I already filled out my bracket. I have South Carolina running it back, and that's just credit to the pieces that they had. I honestly thought in that November game when they were taking on UCLA, they were still trying to navigate life without a dominant big. You got to think about life with Asia Wilson, life with Aaliyah Boston, life with Camila Cardoso. Now you're trying to figure it out, and you're seeing they got all their answers together with Chloe Kitts coming in as the SEC MOP in a breakout season from Sanaya Fagan. This front court overall has been special to see them grow together. They have the guard play, they have the depth, the number 1 bench in the nation with Mylasia Fulwiley, Joyce Edwards as a freshman, Tessa Johnson. This is a deep, dangerous group who has been there before. I am putting it all on Dawn Staley because she knows how to get her squad to a championship game. And we're going to see. Like you mentioned, I don't see them in a bad spot whatsoever as a 1 seed in their position. I still think the path is easy, but you still want the respect of being the number 1 overall seed.
100%. Yeah, it's bragging rights, and completely understand where Coach Staley is coming from. And I love that these coaches are voicing their opinions, not holding back. So we go from one USC to another, coast to coast. So South Carolina talk the talk. Now Lindsay Gottlieb. I have covered a lot of Trojan games this season, and I don't think I've ever seen Lindsay Gottlieb that openly, publicly frustrated about something. And this is how she felt about her team being the 4th number 1 overall seed.
It's not lost on us at all that we've earned a 1 seed for the 2nd year in a row. I think there's so much gratitude to be playing at home, excitement for what we're going to do. But I can't speak for them. For me, I never thought I'd be a 1 seed and feel disrespected, but I thought the committee, I thought there would be very little chance we would be the number 4 overall number 1. And so, we've got a big game here on Saturday against UNCG, and we'll handle it accordingly. But you tell me if you think that bracket that we got should have been the one that it was. I can't speak for the players. I think they're excited to play, but this was not on my bingo card to be a little bit, frustrated after being a 1 seed.
Do you think television ratings have anything to do with this?
Wouldn't you think they would want the best television ratings potentially in Tampa? There's so much basketball to go, but, I don't know. I would think, that makes no sense to me. look at me. You guys see me normally. I'm not normally like this kind of agitated. I like things that make sense. I don't like being disrespected. I think we scheduled UConn and scheduled Notre Dame this year for a reason. You might have to match up with people again, but like I just don't understand. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It also doesn't make sense down the line. But there's a lot of good teams. We're focused on Saturday. Who knows what's going to happen after that? And if it gets to regional finals, we can maybe ask these questions again. But
the big word in that to me, Autumn, was disrespect. Lindsay Gottlieb feels like her team was disrespected. How do you think the committee came to the seeding for the Trojans?
Yeah, when I spoke to the chair, she just mentioned comparing both Texas and USC, looking at overall body of work, obviously, but then recency also. Both lost in their championship games. But then it came down to the common opponent, which is Notre Dame. The selection committee thought Texas was more competitive in their matchup than Southern California, because we saw that Texas lost in overtime to Notre Dame on the road, and then USC lost by 13 at home. They also looked at net losses. As I mentioned, Texas' worst loss was to number 5 Notre Dame. USC's worst loss was to number 24 Iowa, which was an unranked loss. So that all comes into play. Honestly, I had in my latest bracket prediction coming into Selection Sunday, they were in that region 3 for USC. But I'm honestly not mad at the placement. Again, I know you have to face UConn and they're probably tired of this matchup, but Region 3 is a gauntlet over there. You're talking Tennessee, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and even TCU, in my opinion, is very sneaky. You'd be on the same side as South Carolina, who I just circled as a champion to advance to the championship game. All you have to worry about is UConn, a tall task. I know I'm not saying it's like a walk in the park, but you've done it before this year with Juju Watkins have a generational game on the road. And also UCLA in the Final Four if things go chalk, which you've done twice. So I don't think it's a bad draw.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. No matter where you go, there's competition in all 4 quadrants. And what I appreciate is it seems the committee has an explanation for everything. And that to me is key, right? Any question that has been asked, either for me today to you or on television, there has been a specific go-to answer for it. There hasn't been any like ums or ahs or anything that has.
This is what it is.
Yeah, and that's what I respect, right? You have to respect that, right? That there is a process here, and there's going to be people that are upset. So now we go to some other big names. I mentioned, right? My family's in the living room, and they tossed out these other names for number 1 seeds, including Notre Dame and UConn. I want to start with UConn. UConn gets the number 2 seed. I personally am okay with it, considering, they had losses to USC, to Notre Dame, to Tennessee, and the strength of the Big East has to be a factor in that. Anything else you think was considered in the fact that UConn was 2 and not 1?
Well, I think overall, the 1 and the 2 line, it was a major gap when you look at quad 1 wins. UConn only had 5. Yes, they had that dominant 29-point victory over South Carolina. And you look at the 1 line with USC, what they were able to do in the Big Ten and the strength of that conference. Obviously, UConn won the Big East championship game compared to Texas and USC, who fell, but still, everyone on that 1 line, they have double-digit quad 1 wins, and UConn still with 5. But I'm not mad at their placement at all. Again, we're going to see them possibly go up against Juju Watkins, USC, in the Elite 8 possibly. And I think it's really important that they have AZ Fudd back in healthy, because when they played in December, she only played about 8 minutes. And I think that's going to be the X factor. And Paige Buckets, come on, Buckets, overall, she has gotten to the Final Four or championship stage every single year she has played. And the only year UConn didn't get to that stage is when she was injured. So I like their path. Yes, they have to go up against USC, but I think rightfully so, they're 2 seed.
As a fan, I don't hate this USC UConn potential rematch to try and get to the Final Four, because that's what we had last year, right? And if you're the Trojans, you want a second chance at it, you want payback, and you want to be able to prove it. And if you're UConn, you probably feel some confidence in figuring out that you've got the formula. Okay, now to the Midwest and the Irish. We're recording this on St. Patrick's Day. I mean, a couple weeks ago, Notre Dame was #1 in the country when it comes to the AP poll, but they dropped a couple towards the end of the season. And if you ask me, I thought they at least should have gotten to the ACC tournament championship game, but they don't. They drop a game to Duke. That to me is how they dropped to #3. Anything else? Do you think the committee went far back to those like tournament, those the Caribbean tournament games that they had, or it was really the end of the season, the loss to NC State, the loss to Florida State, I believe, and then the ACC tournament?
They definitely look at overall body of work. I think those Bahama games are put past them. But when you look at recency, the interaction of play is how the selection committee worded it. How Notre Dame slid down the stretch. They lost 3 of their last 5 games. Plus, TCU and Duke excelled in their tournament conferences. Like, they were able to come out as conference champs. And for me, in my latest bracket prediction, I also had Notre Dame as a 3 because you couldn't deny what TCU and Duke was doing in the moment. And Duke took down Notre Dame to get to that point. It was very slim, but that just hurt them at the end. They have rest now. They're able to come in and get things together because this is a team that has fallen off, that has been clicking on all cylinders on both ends. But now it's time to turn the page and get right in the tournament because I think they really have something special in their locker room.
Yeah, and we keep bringing up all these rematches. What's so great, what I love about our game is all the best teams have played each other, right? Yeah. So Notre Dame gets a chance to go up against TCU again. In my opinion, 2 very different teams from when they met at the beginning of the season. And Texas does not forget that nail biter.
That overtime.
That overtime loss in South Bend. So, if Notre Dame takes care of business, we could potentially see those rematches. We have a segment here on Got Next called On Her Turf, and we just like to give flowers out, right? There's so many great things that are happening within women's basketball. And the fact that, I'm excited about it, and I almost have a question of why, but the Ivy League has 3 teams going to the NCAA tournament with 2 at-large bids. Obviously, Harvard got the automatic qualification, but Columbia and Princeton. How are we in a world where the Ivy League has 3 teams in the big dance? Autumn, what happened there?
I love it. I'm so happy for these teams. They deserve it. And when I asked, the selection committee about the Ivy League, because the representation has been at an all-time high, they were like, they earned this. It wasn't like, okay, here's 3 Ivy League schools. Like, no, these are schools who belong. We're not even looking at the conference as a whole. We're looking at these individual teams, and they are NCAA tournament teams. So that was really special to hear them really hone into that. But Harvard, I'm so excited for the world to figure out who Harmoni Turner is. She is that girl. I mean, my mouth was on the floor. 44 points versus Princeton earlier this season. She had a 41-10 game. She needs to be put on the map, and I think March is her season. Like, she lives for the moment. Look at this, 7 for 11. And she did it 63% beyond the arc. She's a bucket getter. She is has that killer mentality. She wants the ball in her hand. She's long, she's scrappy, and she plays defense, like a 2-way player that the world needs to know about. So I'm excited that they were able to break into the tournament.
This 50, 40, 90. I mean, we're talking like Elena Deladon percentages here, right? There's single digit men and women that are able to hold those shooting splits. So I agree. Shout out to the Ivies. Shout out to Harmoni Turner and everything that she's been able to do this season. So love to see the Ivy Leagues represented. For me personally, it's the mid-majors that have my heart. And I this past weekend, just bawled on my couch as I watched so many people punch their ticket. I played at a mid-major. I played at Elon University. And in these conferences, I'm talking CAA, A10, Sun Belt, right? Like, you have to win your conference tournament in order to go to the NCAA tournament. That's the only way. I'm of course biased, and I would lobby that some of these leagues I do think deserve at-large bids, but it's been great to see a George Mason going to the dance for the first time. William & Mary, the first men's or women's team from that school to go to the big dance. High Point is in the Big South, right around the corner from me. Arkansas State beat the juggernaut of JMU. JMU was undefeated in conference play, and then Arkansas, comes back in the championship game, gets the dub. And there's so many historical moments to all of this too. Where's your soft spot for the mid-majors?
I went to Kennesaw State, so definitely love the mid-majors. And these are 6 teams who have never been to the NCAA tournament. That is what March is about. Like, you play for these moments. You play for your sister. You play for the next woman to you. And anything can happen. Like, that's the beauty of this sport. You come in hungry. You come in really honing into your identity. And you get the job done. And you come out as a champ. You get to play in the big dance. That's special. It's special. I love being a part of this game and covering it. I love, the confetti moments and just seeing their hard work play out right in front of them. So I'm excited. Hopefully we get some Cinderella stories, because that always makes March Madness so fun. But shout out to all the mid-majors and the 6 new teams who now have a shot at continuing their season.
Yeah, their reactions are always the best. Like I know, the top 16 teams, they expect to be in the big dance, and it's all kind of about where they're going to end up. And some of them are even upset about where they end up. Yeah, but these mid-majors who punch, it's glorious no matter where it is. They're just excited to hear their name called across that board. I actually want to throw one out at you. Is there any upsets that you feel like could happen? I know I'm like going off script here, and I haven't done you've got your bracket done within like 12 hours. You are a mad woman.
Crazy.
Was there any, when you were filling out your bracket, were there any, I'm thinking like 8-9 games, 6-11s that stood out to you where we could potentially see some upsets?
So ironically, we're talking about Harvard. I want to say Michigan State, Harvard is very interesting. Harvard knocked off 3 Power 4 schools already this season. And they've seen 2 Big Ten schools, Northwestern and Indiana, in overtime. They know what it takes to defeat these teams. Also, I have, who else did I put? Norfolk State is also interesting. They beat 2 SEC schools. So that's one to look out for with Maryland. I know Brenda Freese has her teams ready for March every single year, but I wonder their injury status and if they're all healthy, maybe that could be a potential upset, but we'll see. We'll see. What else did I have? Those 8-9 seats are interesting. I'm excited to see Creighton. They're always a great story with their capability of shooting, the pace they play with. There's plenty. I mean, the spread is really good. Richmond is also a sneaky team. Iowa for sure. That's one for me. I was even saying throughout the entire course of the season, they only have 1 double-digit loss on the year. They almost knocked off UCLA and Ohio State, and they did knock off USC. I think they could be a very scary team to match up with.
They had 2 battles against Ohio State, one in the conference tournament and then one in the regular season. Both were single-digit games. Who's your Final Four teams? Because I might as well ask. You got the bracket filled out.
Okay, we're going all out. So I have UCLA. I have South Carolina. You can't go all chalk because that's not fun.
Do you have all 4 number ones or what?
No.
Okay.
I think Notre Dame figures it out.
Wow.
I think they do. So I have a 3 seed in there.
Texas doesn't make it. Yes. Okay.
And they've already did that before. So we'll see a neutral site, how that all shakes out. And then I'm a history girl. I'm big into history. Like, I really play into that. And with Paige Beckers, that common denominator of getting to the Final Four or a championship stage, ironically, the year she doesn't play, that's not ironic to me that she doesn't, or UConn doesn't make it to the Final Four for the first time in history. I think with AZ Fudd back, Sarah Strong, now, I mean, she doesn't even play like a freshman. The way she's been playing and just everyone collectively around them, you don't have to rely on Paige so much. This is a serious squad, and you also know USC, you face them. You make adjustments and you get back there. So that's my Final Four. I don't know if it's a hot take, but
I respect it all. And I mean, I'm always an advocate of what's best for the game. And I think it's always good when you don't have the 4 number ones. And I know everybody works really hard all season to get those rankings and to get those seeds, but the theme this year has been parity.
Yeah.
I really think there's 5 to 6 teams that have a shot at it all, and your bracket proves that. Before we go today, we can't leave without talking the W, right? We're all locked in on Selection Sunday, and then like in the background, the reigning champs, the New York Liberty, are like, not so fast. Remember, we're continuing to make moves in the W. They trade for 2019 champion, all defensive team member Natasha Cloud. If you remember, Natasha was in Phoenix, then got traded to Connecticut. Now she's getting traded to New York. I think this will be a stop for her. I think she'll actually play in New York. And New York didn't have to give up a lot. My goodness. The number 7 overall pick, they already have a veteran squad. So there's not many minutes, even if they had that pick, for someone to really come in and play. And then the 2026 first round pick. What are your thoughts on this move for the Liberty?
I was so excited for Tasha because she was very vocal about how Phoenix told her she was going to retire with this organization. She found out via social media with all of us that she was traded. And I think this was due for a 9-year vet. Like, she deserves this. She works hard for this. Not even a 9-year vet, a WNBA champion at that. So I'm excited to see, Natasha start a new chapter with a championship caliber team, a contending team, the defending champs coming in. They didn't need to shake up the league with crazy, picks or whatever, or like trades. They already have their star pieces, bringing back majority of their squad. I was very hurt when Kayla Thornton moved on to Golden State Valkyries, but I'm excited for her new chapter. But how they reloaded, bringing on another PG, someone who plays defense. Natasha was the perfect fit for this team, and I'm excited to see how it shakes out for her. I think it's going to be really good. She's close to home from Philly. It's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love the move for the Liberty. You mentioned it adds another ball handler. They don't have Courtney Vandersloot anymore. And you mentioned Kayla Thornton. I thought she was just, her toughness and her grit was such an important piece to that Liberty team. And I think Natasha Cloud has all of those factors and a little bit more, when you talk about the ball handling, her ability to create for others, and of course the defensive accolades. So great move. Shout out to Jonathan Kolb and everybody there at the New York Liberty. Autumn, you're great. Like, I love picking your brain about all the bracketology stuff, because I know people have their opinions, but what I love is that it is a very intentional process. Yeah. And like, they're in Indianapolis for 5 days, right? Like, probably stuck in a room, but they have been studying these teams all season long. Yes. Like, each person on the committee has different leagues that they have to watch. They're constantly taking notes. Like, these are people that are highly, highly educated on what's going on in women's basketball, and to the best of their ability are trying to come up with these seedings.
That's a perfect way to put it. Like, I know everyone wants to ride for their teams, and rightfully so. Like, you want your team to win a championship, but I think the selection committee, hats off to them. They put in tireless hours. I literally saw one of them in the airport. Like, they fly right out after they insert the bracket, and now they're headed to their assignments. They work year-round, tireless hours, and what they do for the game is unmatched. So shout out to them. It is not easy. I do like my bracket for funsies, and they're here putting the official bracket together. I can only imagine how tough that is and how stressful that is, because you want to get it right. But I think they do every year, and shout out to them.
Yeah, and I know you're going to be busy this month, traveling everywhere, content, and then I'm sure Tampa is your final destination. So good luck with all your coverage, and thanks for always making time for us here on Got Next.
You. This is fun. Always love you, Zora. You are like one of my favorite people in this world. So super proud of you. So happy we could hop on this pod together, but thank you for having me.
Of course. Until next time. Thanks, everyone.